Hey, Scandalized listeners, Charlie and Jackie here with a really exciting announcement.
We're doing our very first live recording of Scandalized at Podfort 2025. We'll be live at the Boise Contemporary Theater on Thursday, March 27th at 4 p.m.
Jackie and I are each going to bring you a fresh scandal and break things down from an expert lens, just like on the show.
We'd love to see our amazing listeners, so bring your friends and come talk scandals with us.
That's Thursday, March 27th at 4 p.m. from the Boise Contemporary Theater. See you then.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. More Idaho Matters right now. Award-winning author Lauren Connolly is back with her latest novel. It's called P.S. I Hate You. It's a story of loss and grief and really trying to find yourself on the other side of that. And we're lucky enough to have Lauren joining us today to talk more. Lauren, really nice to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So can you give us a brief synopsis of the book?
Sure. So this is, I like to refer to it as a bittersweet rom-com. I'm a big fan of romance, so that's what I write. And P.S. I Hate You is pretty much a post-mortem road trip between two people who are not fans of one another, but because of the last request of a loved one, they are required to visit 8 different states together to spread the ashes of the person who had passed away, and they are left letters that they need to open at each destination that have them revealing hidden parts of themselves to the person that they least want to be vulnerable around.
So where did you come up with the idea for the novel and Maddie, the main character?
So actually this, the first little seed of the idea came because a family friend of my parents, a couple, one of the partners passed away, and he requested that his wife spread his ashes in the 2 states that he hadn't got to visit. And that really had me thinking about what it is like to leave a task for your loved ones after they're gone, and does that help the grieving process? Does that prolong it? And then when I thought more about it, my mind went back to the very popular movie and book, P.S. I Love You, which is kind of a similar type of idea, where there's these tasks that are left, and at first it can be exciting, but it can also bring up different kinds of emotions through the process. And so that's kind of where the idea started from. And then I just took it with my kind of off-brand morbid humor for the rest of the book.
Well, and so we should say that Maddie loses her brother. So I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying this. Really young. He's 29. He dies of cancer. Why did you decide to really delve into that kind of grief? And what I mean by that is that there is a profoundly different type of grief when you lose a sibling, especially someone who is very close in age to you. I actually have gone through that. Then let's say when you lose a parent, which is completely different.
Yeah, and so the reason that I chose for it to be Maddie losing her brother was, it's like you said, it's a very intense experience to lose someone that there's always this idea that the people in your life will eventually pass away, but you expect it to be decades and decades into the future. And so it is very shocking. It's almost, it's a deeper wound in some ways when someone leaves much sooner than expected. And in Maddie's case, Josh is her kind of lodestone in her life. He is the only family member that truly showed her love and affection, because she has a toxic relationship with her parents. And so it's not just the loss of someone who she expected to have for her whole life. It is the one family member that she relied on. So there's just multiple layers to this grief. And I think I tend to veer towards brother-sister relationships in my books because I only have brothers. I have 2 brothers. And so there were multiple times where I was crying during writing this because sometimes when you're a writer, in order to connect to an emotion, you have to either have experienced it or imagine what it would be like. And so it's morbid, but I had to think about what would it have been like
Mm-hmm.
if I lost one of my brothers within a year of knowledge, like if I lost them tomorrow, if I lost them a year from now. And so
Right.
it's yeah, it's kind of an abrupt grief that you don't really plan for, you don't really know how to deal with, and so it can hit you kind of harder in some ways.
Well, and it's interesting. You bring up a good point, saying when you were writing this, you found yourself in tears many times. Well, in the book, Maddie almost carries a sense of guilt because she can't cry over the loss of her brother. Why was it important that you have her struggle with that?
So that is actually something that came not I don't base my characters off of myself. That's
Uh-huh.
none of these are autobiographies by any means. But I do sometimes give characters qualities that I have, and it's interesting. I can cry pretty easily when it comes to fiction, but when it comes to my own personal grieving process, I don't tend to cry, and I think it's a very vulnerable thing to cry by yourself or around other people. And that is something that my character Maddie struggles with in the book, is being vulnerable with herself
Mm,
or anyone. And I wanted to show that grieving happens in a lot of different ways. A lot of people think that grieving is just sadness and crying. And for Maddie, grieving is anger and a lot of sarcasm. And that you can, if you think that you're grieving the wrong way, that can give you a lot of guilt. And so that's
hmm
just also piling upon guilt of living when someone else has passed away. And so it gives more emotions to explore within the text.
mm. Well, I have to say, I cry way too easily. Like it drives me crazy. So I wish I had a little bit more of Maddie in me where I could keep it together because it's
It's
I
yeah,
my
it's an uncomfortable experience to cry. I have to remember to take my contacts out if I'm going to cry because it just
I know. Then they stick to your eyeballs. So,
exactly.
another thing that I thought was interesting in this book was it kind of felt like Josh was trying to matchmake from the grave, right? By putting Maddie and Dom back in this situation together. Um, and I'm assuming you was that kind of part of your thought process when when you looked at the theme of the book.
Yeah, that so in reading this book or in writing this book, I wanted Josh to be a character
Mm-hmm.
that felt like he was present throughout the entire book, because I think a lot of times it's not uncommon in books and romance in a lot of genres for characters to have lost someone and to be dealing with the grief of having lost someone. But I think a lot of times the character that is lost exists in the backstory, but I wanted Josh to feel like you were learning about him throughout the book in the same way that Maddie is learning more about her brother, even though he's technically gone. And one of Josh's key characteristics is that he always tried to take care of Maddie because he was her older brother, and he would do it in kind of odd ways. He would challenge her, he would make her step out of her comfort zone. And so I thought that a good way to incorporate that into the story is Josh's goal is to take care of Maddie even though he's gone. And in his mind, the best way to do that is to, yeah, kind of be a matchmaker, because he's decided I want my best friend and my sister to have
Mm-hmm.
some kind of relationship after I'm gone. And so I'm going to use my death to force them into this. And so, yeah, that was my kind of thought process behind Josh and his letters and the manipulations that he's left behind.
Yeah. So I don't want to give too much away about the locations, but how did you choose where these locations would be where they would scatter Josh's ashes?
That was actually, changed what the locations were going to be a few times. At one point, when I originally pitched the book to my agent and then an editor, I had more states on the list, and we kind of discussed how many states there needed to be to actually tell this story. And so we kind of settled on, at one point it was 15, and then it was 9, and then we got to 8. And so and also Josh is a well-traveled person, so it makes more sense that there's not too many states he hasn't visited, but there needs to be enough that the story actually happens. And so when it came to actually picking the states, I had kind of different reasons for different states. The first state that they go to, which I don't feel like it's too much of a spoiler, is Delaware, which is actually where I grew up. And so I was like, I feel like Delaware is often overlooked, even though it's technically the first state. So I was like, I want to send my characters to the first state, and and so when it came to picking the other states, I wanted a kind of diversity of climates and areas, but also states that may sometimes get overlooked when people are thinking about where they want to visit. And so when it came to out west, I knew one of the first scenes that I had in my mind was Maddie and Dom hiking specifically in the Rocky Mountains. I lived in Colorado for a few years, and just hiking in the Rocky Mountains versus the Appalachians is different. And what I saw in my mind was them in the Rockies. And so I knew I had to pick a state in the Rocky Mountains. But I was, again, thinking Josh is a well-traveled guy. He's a wildlife photographer. What state that has the Rocky Mountains might he have put off? Because again, Josh thought that he had more time. He didn't know that he was going to be passing away when he did. And so that was kind of my thought process, is where is it logical that Josh has gone, and places that Josh may have overlooked because he thought he had time in the future to get to them.
So I have to ask you, why in the world does Maddie love cheese so much?
Well, Maddie loves cheese because cheese is fantastic.
I mean, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm just wondering.
Well, I am a vegetarian, and so a lot of my diet is cheese based, and I think that food is a very good comforting element within stories, and so I wanted to pick something that was versatile, and I could demonstrate Maddie interacting with it in a few different ways that were just subtle nods to like grilled cheese sandwiches that Josh used to make her. They were just they're little bits of comfort, and they're ways that she might not necessarily realize she's doing self-care, but baking herself some brie is a way that she tries to take care of herself now that she's the only one who does.
Before I let you go, what are you hoping that folks take away from reading this book?
I hope that people take away the fact that grief shows up in a whole bunch of different ways, and that however you're grieving, that is the right way to grieve, as long as you're not physically hurting someone else. Which actually Maddie does get kind of scathing with her set downs in the book. So maybe be acknowledging how your grief might be affecting those around you, but also know that there's not just one way to do it. And I also hope that people take away that there are interesting places everywhere. There is something special about all the different states that Maddie and Dom travel to in this book. And a lot of times what makes traveling special is the person that you're there with, and how you treat the excursion. So it's not always the destination, but it's the journey that can be the fun and meaningful part.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.